I'm Kyle Long, and you're listening to Cultural Manifesto. The guitarist, singer, and songwriter Steve Wariner is one of Indiana's most celebrated country music artists. Born in Noblesville, Indiana in 1954, Wariner is a 4-time Grammy Award winner, a member of the Grand Ole Opry, and a country music hitmaker with 14 number one singles. Steve Wariner is also a visual artist, and a new exhibition of his art titled The Flip Side opens this week in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I recently spoke with Steve Wariner to learn more about his work as an artist and his history in the Indianapolis country music scene. Mr. Wariner, thank you so much for taking time to speak with our audience here in Indiana. I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Kyle, thank you so much. I knew we were going to be speaking today. I was thrilled to be with you and be here in Indy. I love it. So glad to be with you.
Yeah. Of course, our audience here in Indiana and around the world know you as a legendary country music singer, songwriter, and guitarist, but you're also a visual artist, and this has been part of your life for many years. You have a new exhibition of your work opening titled The Flip Side. It's open now. It's running till July 26th at the Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And as we start today, I want to ask you about one of the paintings featured in your exhibition. It's called Happy New Year, Dad. And it features your dad, Roy Wariner, who was a veteran country music performer in Noblesville, a deep influence on you. Tell us about your dad and what you wanted to say about him in this painting.
Well, man, thank you. You made my day talking about that one. It's so personal. But I remember my dad, early memories of my father. He had a regular job, of course. He worked at the Noblesville Casting Company, a foundry that made, I think they did make some auto parts. They cast some parts for Fisher Auto Body and so forth. But he was there many years. But I remember as a small kid, grade school kid, my dad's band would practice at our house. He'd play on the weekends for fun and probably extra cash and blah, blah, blah. But they would set up and play at our house. And I've loved it so much, bringing in amplifiers and drum kits and stuff. And I was a little kid, like, I'm doing that. That's what I want to do. And it wasn't long till my dad brought me out. And as a kid, I would play with my dad. He'd let me come out and play. And that painting I did, I found an old black and white photo of my dad. I really think it's an American Legion in Noblesville, the American Legion. Upstairs, I think. And I played there later myself a few times, but I played. I found this photograph and I thought, well, that looks like a lovely little watercolor. And so I started doodling and messing with it. My dad has in the painting, he's got on his New Year's pointed hat, his little New Year's hat and ringing in the new year. So I did it in a real free, loose kind of style. I didn't use any kind of pen and ink or anything, all watercolor, just washes. And when I finished, I sealed it with a fixative, and then I'd put a coal wax coating on top of it, which gives it a real sheen. And anyway, it's in the show at Mont Haven. It's definitely in the show. But those early memories of my dad, that made me who I am. It's getting to play with my dad. He would write songs. I heard original songs and was blown away. Like, where did that come from? I don't even. And my dad would say, well, I wrote that, and then he would play some originals, but he was, I certainly believe, and I mean it, I think he could have come to Nashville and done something in the music world if not for a house full of kids out of nowhere, so, and he was dedicated to his family. So he certainly could have, because he was a really fine musician and a fiddler, guitar player, played steel, lap steel, played. And I was telling you off the air before we came on, I visited the Kurt Vonnegut Museum recently. And I was in Indy for a funeral and my brother. But we went to the Vonnegut Museum leaving town. And we also made a little stop down at Fountain Square and went to Arthur's Music
I was going to ask you about where you were buying gear.
Yeah, we went to Arthur's and
back
saw
in the day.
Linda and everybody there, and it brings back full circle for me, because I remember going there with my dad, and as a kid and going in there and just couldn't believe all the instruments. And my dad bought a jazz master there when I was real small. We lived in Fishers, and my dad he traded in his Gibson archtop guitar and bought a Fender Jazz Master. And that's the guitar I learned to play on. And I think it was 1962, maybe three, but I think two. And that's the guitar I learned to play on. I still have it. And that guitar came from Arthur's. And I love that story. And I love that whole story of Arthur's because of Amos Arthur and that family. And it's still the same family, same location, everything. It's unheard of. And I just love that store so much. And they're so great, the family there and Linda and everybody. So Amy. So, yeah, I love it. It's Indy. Of course, my history there over on the west side and playing all the years. So, it's like it's coming home for me for sure.
I appreciate you mentioning that. And I had a couple more questions about your dad, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Was his band called the Tritones? Was that the
name?
No,
they were not the Tritones. My dad, it's funny, he never had real names. It was just Roy Wariner. One time it was, and I remember my brother Dave, who was very artistic, he went on to be for a long time, a renowned illustrator and did a lot of books and album covers and stuff. But, he's the one I'm telling you, went to Heron School of Art and studied there at IUPUI. But my dad's band, one time I remember I helped David, we painted a poster, put two posters together. That was our backdrop, and we played places. And it was Roy Wariner and the Warner Boys.
The Warner Boys. Okay.
The Warner Boys.
Yeah.
And so my brother played bass and I played drums, believe it or not, in that band. Well, I had a set of drums. I went up to Vic Zen Music in Noblesville and bought a set. My dad bought me a little set of drums, Trixon drums, and I still have them, by the way.
Wow.
Still have part of them. They're not all there, but most of them. And Vic was a good friend of my dad's. He worked in the store some and helped Vic out. And that family, the whole Zen family, they were close to as Marge and Vic. Yeah, man, my dad was one of 12 kids from rural south central Kentucky. My mom was from across the holler, as they say, and they were from that same area and came to Indianapolis area in the 50s. And I was born in 54, Christmas Day up in Noblesville. But my dad was one of 12 kids. They all were very musical. It blew my mind because I had an uncle that was a 30-year naval officer, and he would come home on leave and he would stay with us and he would pick up a guitar and wear it out. Harmonica. I never heard anybody play harmonica like that. He was great. And I have an uncle, Sam, that was a minister. He was a preacher and played great harmonica, guitar. All of my uncles played. One uncle, Jimmy, the youngest, he was more like a big brother, but I played in some bands with him. He was a really good guitar player and learned a lot from Jimmy. And the first television I was ever on was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. We would go there one summer and play these live television shows with my uncle's band. And I've later found out that Ricky Skaggs was on that show, and so was Keith Whitley. We were all kids on this show performing, and it was just a local variety kind of show. And my dad, you'll like this, Kyle, you'll like this story. My dad, in the 6th grade, I was in the 6th grade, and my dad said, I'm going to go down to Indianapolis. We're going to cut a record.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this.
and so it was the first recording session I ever did, ever. And my dad, he said, I want you to play drums and Kenny play bass. And there was a guy, Jim Davis, that taught guitar lessons at Vic Zen's. And he played in my dad's band, and he was a tremendous guitar player, thumb style. He played like Merle Travis and Chet Atkins. And that was a big influence on me. And so Jim Davis was in our band. So we all went down, and he rented some time at Jan Eden Studios, which I don't know if you even know about that.
Oh, yeah, of course. It was over by the fairgrounds. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
See, I've always wondered where that was.
Yeah.
I was there, and I remember I was nervous. It was the first time I ever recorded, and I was in the 6th grade, because I remember that very well. 7th grade. Yeah, maybe 6th or 7th grade that summer, I think, between. And there we are coming in. And this blew my mind because as a kid, we were watching the local Channel 4. Was it WHS? I think it was. Or
WTTV.
WTTV
Yeah.
Channel 4, Sarkis Tarzian
Yes, correct.
Broadcasting. And anyway, there was all the kids shows, of course, Popeye and Janie, and
Yeah.
there was
Cowboy Bob. I don't know if you
Cowboy
were.
Bob and Harlow
Yeah,
Hickenlooper.
yeah.
And but anyway, and I later, a couple of things. I talked to Cowboy Bob once later when I was having Hit Records. We had a conversation on the phone. He was selling a Gibson archtop guitar, and I've told him, I said, "You don't know, man. I used to watch you as a kid. I watched you, man," and he got a kick out of that. And also that day when we recorded, I walked through the halls and I saw Harlow Hickenlooper at the studio that day.
That's awesome.
And I was like, I'm a sixth grade kid, you know? And so I go, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So anyway, we cut Jan at Jan Eden's, and so it was close to the fairgrounds. I wondered about that.
Yeah.
I remember that it was so professional to me, you know, the talk back, Roy Warner boys, take one, and it's very formal. And I remember we cut it, and then we messed up a little bit. So Roy Warner boys, take two, and we did that like 3 or 4 takes. And I actually have an acetate. They call acetate pressing.
You do.
I do have one
Wow.
from that session. It says Jan Eden's, all that. I got it. I kept it after my dad passed away, and so I thought that was so neat. And then
Did that come out? Because
it was out. It was
on
out
a label called Camaro.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
totally. It was out on.
That's you guys. I was never sure.
That's me playing drums, and my brother Kenny and Jim Davis and my father.
In the world you're living in, you are a queen. In your own eyes, you own everything. But everything must come to an end. Are you happy in the world you're living in? You want to play the field and be a queen. You don't want anyone you've ever seen. You don't want love.
Later, I started playing with other bands. One band I played with was a guy from Alexandria over around Anderson. His name was Jack Hoppus. And he got a guy in his band. We're still very close friends. I talk to him all the time. He's from Southern Indiana, named Harry Davis. I don't know if that name rings a bell, but he was the owner, and he had a large, very, very, very successful advertising firm in Indianapolis, very successful. And I wish I could. I just never did. I just knew him as a cool guitar player. Played a 355. We're still in touch. He lives in Carmel, and but anyway, he worked part time. Before his ad company, or maybe during, he worked for. Was it Channel 4 or one of the channels that had Sammy Terry?
Yeah, that was Channel 4. Yeah,
Channel 4, and he helped Bob Carter do some of the props and stuff for Sammy Terry. And my mind was,
I'd love to talk to him.
Sammy Terry?
Yeah.
He was actually, because we laughed about that. I said, as a kid, that scared us to death. I mean, and it was so good. But he was talking about Bob Carter. They were very good friends, and he worked for the TV station before his ad firm, I think. That was his previous world. But he was talking about how they were talking about, we need a spider that's so they would look around the studio just to find, maybe this will work. And they were making their props. And I mean, I love that stuff. It's so great. It's Indiana history, man.
Yeah. Bob Carter's son still performs as Sammy Terry too.
No way. Is that right?
Yeah, that still lives on.
Don't you love that?
Yeah.
Do you know much about Mockingbird Hill Park over in Anderson?
Oh, I've heard about it. Yeah. Is this where they have big concerts and things?
Yeah, they used to have over in Anderson.
They bring in big country music stars.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I'm familiar with it.
I later learned when I toured. I later realized and learned that what it was it was a stopping off place for a lot of country people, because you might tour, you might play Minneapolis. Well, coming back home from, maybe you played in Nebraska and then you played Minneapolis. Well, you got Minneapolis back to Nashville. I wish we could pick up another place to play. Well, they this was a great pickup place for people that would come through. Oh, let's play Muncie, Indiana. Yeah, we can play it for that money because we're coming through there anyway, going to Nashville. So they would always have big names playing Mockingbird Hill Park, and all the Southern people, like my family, well, all the Southern people that were in Indiana now for work, that when you saw a concert there, it was just full of all country music fans and people from the South that had migrated north, and it was I saw Johnny Cash there in now think about this. I was a kid, but I saw Johnny Cash in 1963, Johnny Cash. And I saw Jerry Lee Lewis. I saw Buck Owens many times, Merle Haggard and George Jones. I saw so many artists there as a kid. I was watching all these people get in their buses and take off. And I know it had to be an impression on me as a young kid trying to learn how to play music. I want to do that. Because my mind would be so romantic. Like, where are they going from here? Buck Owens lives in California. Where are they going? And I later became friends with all these people. I talked to Bill Anderson now about Mockingbird Hill Park, and he lights up.
Really?
He goes, "Oh my gosh, that place!" Yeah, Buck Owens. I've talked to him about it.
Really?
Buzz, George Jones, all those guys. I knew them all, and lucky enough to talk about it. And they all talk about it with much affection. It's a cool place for them to play. Marty Robbins, and I later played there myself a couple times.
Really?
Before it went away. It was kind of in its waning last years. It was not what it was at once, but it was a thriving, awesome place one time. I saw Roger Miller there. I saw, everybody, Jim Reeves. I saw tons of people, as a kid, great opportunity watching these young. I became friends with Tom Brumley, who played steel with Buck Owens. He's a buckaroo. And we were dear friends all the way to his end, and we always laughed and talked about, I would sit on the end of the stage and watch him play steel guitar, it's just awesome memories, and then when I started having hit records, I remember playing the Indiana State Fair. I opened once for Loretta Lynn, the first time I played the Indiana State Fair in the Coliseum. And then I opened once again for Kenny Rogers there at the fair. And then after that, I played by myself. People opened for me, next 3 or 4 times I played it. But it was always cool to come back to Indiana and play like at the state fair or something. It's so great, to get to come back.
Yeah. I know you grew up immersed in country music with your dad and going up to Mockingbird Hill and catching all those legendary artists. Right. I wanted to ask about another interest of yours as a young person. You were a Beatles fan. I know you played in a group called the Summits. Was this like a local garage band? Was that a rock band? You were probably 12 years old.
Love it. That's so great. I love it that you know that. Yeah, we had my brother Kenny started a band, and it was just like the movie. What's the movie? That Thing You Do.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm blanking on the title. Yeah.
That Thing You Do
is
the name of it.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but that one scene, I would swear, Kyle, that they were around when we did this, because we sat at our keyboard. I loosely say keyboard player. He owned a Farfisa, I'll put it that way. But we sat at his house, all of us, and I was the young kid. They were older than me. They were all like 4, 5, 6 years older, and I was the younger kid. But I could play. I played drums. I was more, I'm just saying it true, that I was more musical really than they were probably. But they were teenagers, and I was 6th, 7th grade, but they were driving cars and older. I was the kid. But we would sit around Jimmy Stevenson's house, and we would say, what are we going to call ourselves? How about no, that's not good. How about no? And finally somebody goes, the Summits. And so we were the Summits. And we played dances and VFWs and stuff and played around there. And really it was, the songs we could figure out, a few Beatles songs and some Beach Boys. And so we just played rock and roll. We didn't play much country at all. We would go up downtown Noblesville and buy some shirts alike at Murphy's or something.
You never recorded with them, did you?
No, we never recorded. Yeah. But we did. My dad had a little tape recorder. We did a couple times, just mess around. But I wish I had a copy of. I do have a red tape recording of me with my dad's band playing, and you can hear me and my brothers in the background. I was so young, I wasn't playing yet. but you could hear us like making noise in the background.
That's cool.
But the Summits, they were cool. We played some cool music. And my brother David, he fixed up a little light. He was always a tinkerer. He could make things, and he took a Christmas tree light that, remember, they used to, the aluminum trees, they would turn the wheel. He made a little light thing that would be we had like a little light show that we would do. It was pretty cool. And the Summits, and but it didn't last long. Our drummer Kenny Kraft got drafted and went to Vietnam, and life rolled on. And I remember once I had my drums in the back seat of the car, and they took off and from our practice, and we just finished practicing, but somebody took off in my brother's '59 Ford, and when he got back, he had wrecked into a fence post. May have been a beer or two involved. I don't know. I was a kid, so I don't know. But he smashed the side of the car, and my drum head got busted.
Yeah, that's
I was so mad, And he wrecked the car. It didn't tear up anything else, but just busted the head of my drum. But anyway, I was rambling on. But those are fun days, man.
I wanted to ask you a few questions, or a question about your experience in the country music scene of Indianapolis, which is a subject I do a lot of research on. When you were coming up in the 60s and 70s, country music was huge here. I mean, there were clubs in every part of the city. You mentioned the north side, the east side, the west side, everywhere. You were playing in clubs like the Blue Flame, the Blue Room, the Nashville Country Club.
Neely's Blue Room.
Neely's Blue Room, yeah. I know you were underage at the time. What are your memories of the scene here during that time? And how old were you when you started playing in these clubs in Indianapolis?
I'm going to tell you, Kyle, I was so young. I didn't have my driver's license yet. I used to play at the Blue Flame, which was right across from International Harbor
on Brookville Road, yeah.
Brookville Road. And I was so young, and I was probably 15, just turning 16. I was 15. I know it probably when I was 15 and probably looked 11, probably, honestly, because I looked 15 when I was 30, I think. Honestly, I did. I looked, and so and Jack Hoppus and whoever I was playing with, they always just told, the guy that owned that club was named Noel Seabolt, was his name, Noel Seabolt, and he was one of those guys. He was interesting. I really liked him a lot. He with Jack, with whoever I was playing with, they would say, "Oh, he's 21," and he'd go, "Okay, all right." And so, but I never drank or anything. I never tried to cross that line. So they were okay. They knew I stayed to myself. I mean, I don't know how they got away with it. You couldn't do it now, but I would go into these places and play. And I remember once at the Blue Flame, I've worked in a band, that band I was with Jack Hoppus. The steel player was Larry McIntyre, and he lived up in Arcadia, if you know where that is, Cicero, and then Arcadia. And he would come by and pick me up. He had a '64 Ford wagon, and he would come by and pick me up and drive. He was in the band, so we'd drive all the way down to Brookville Road, and so he was my ride until I could drive. And he didn't drink, and I didn't drink. So he was married and had 2 kids, but that was my ride. And my mom and dad knew him very well, so they trusted him explicitly. We knew him since forever, our families. And so I was always safe with him. But I mean, you'll like this story. One time I was there, and believe it or not, they brought in some big acts at the Blue Flame. They brought Jerry Lee Lewis in there once, and we opened in that little nasty club. It was Jerry Lee Lewis played. Hank Williams Jr. played there once, which later, it's funny, I toured with Hank all over Canada, and years later, fast forward 12 years, and I'm touring with him all across Canada and U.S. But Hank Jr. was in, and he was young and just starting out really at that time. But he had a bass player named Daryl McCall, and I knew Daryl McCall because he had been around a long time. He was kind of somewhat of an artist himself, and a bit, and was from Texas. I knew him, and I didn't know him, but I knew of him. He'd played with Fair and Young and had a history. So he invited me after our gig. He said, after we play, we're all going back to the Ramada, wherever they were staying. I think it was off of Shadeland or something. I don't even know where it was. But so I went over there. I rode with him and left my car at the Blue Flame. And I thought we'd be back in a bit. Well, they went over to the motel, and they all had music instruments set up in rooms and were just partying, and they were just playing music. they were all drinking and stuff. A lot of them were and doing things, but I had my driver's license, just got my license. Well, I look up and I was there to play music, and we played music, and I look out the window and it's light outside, and I went, oh no. I didn't even tell my mom and dad or nothing. Well, my dad had the police out looking for me, and I left my car back at the Blue Flame. So my dad drives down all the way to Brookville Road to the Blue Flame. And of course, no cell phones in those days. And my dad and so finally I finally find a phone and call my mom, and she says, your dad is livid. He's got the police. Everybody's looking for you. They found your car, but not you. They had no idea. I called, just wanted to go jam, Anyway, long story, I get back over to my car. They drop me off, and my dad is standing by my car, leaned against it, mad. And he looks at my eyes, and he goes, your eyes are bloodshot. And I go, I've not been, Dad, I've not done anything. I did except play music, I promise you. And that's true. And he goes, your eyes are bloodshot. And I go, yeah, because I've been up for 48 hours. But isn't that cool? My dad was so bad. And then Daryl McCall, when I see him to this day, I still see him every now and then. We'll laugh about that. He said, I remember when I hijacked you and took you to our hotel room. But I was just young, and all I wanted to do was go play and jam with the Nashville guys. Mm-hmm. I knew I was coming down here at some point, so.
What was the name of the band you were playing with at the Blue Flame at 15 years old?
That was called Jack Hoppus.
Okay.
And I think his band was called Jack Hoppus and the Country Pride.
Okay.
But I worked with a guy, I got to say this. I worked couple summers, I worked at the Blue Flame with a guy. And my mind just went blank for a second. Glenn Scott. Does that name ring a bell? Yeah. Glenn Scott? Well, he was in radio at some point. He did radio DJ's work, and he had spinal bifida or some affliction that he was born with. He was on crutches, and I'm trying to say it in a gingerly way. I don't, for lack of a better word, it was a deformity with his spine. But he got around it, and he played great, and he sang. But he asked me one summer, I just got my license. It was the hardest summer I've ever had, probably musically speaking, but I learned more than anything in my whole life, probably that summer in the music world, because he called me and he says, I got an opportunity to play 6 nights a week at the Blue Flame. And the money was like stupid money for me. We were 6 every night except Sunday. And we played 5 sets a night. And he goes, and I want you to be, I never had been the front man yet, ever. I just been playing in the band. And he goes, you're going to be the front guy. And I've got Larry Ratliff, Ratliff, Larry Ratliff playing drums, and then Glenn playing guitar. We just did a trio. And I played bass and sang, and I'd never even been a front guy. I knew 6 songs probably. So I went to work. And learn songs. And I even had a notebook a little bit. I was trying to make it inconspicuous to read a few things, because we had to do 5 sets. And Larry Ratliff could sing about 3 songs, and Glenn Scott did 20 songs maybe. But I really went to school and learned to be a front guy and learned how to work an audience. And that was not always an easy audience, because it was workers coming in. Their shifts would change, and they were in there.
That's a rough part of the city.
Oh my gosh. And then add a few women in there on top of that. There was some fights and stuff. I really went to school, wouldn't trade anything in the world. And Glenn Scott is gone now, but he was such a big part of my musical legacy, if there is such a thing, or my musical upbringing, and Glenn Scott, I always try to give him, I wish I could have gave him more kudos when he was living, I just didn't get to.
Katie, bar the door. Katie, bar the door. I don't want nobody hanging around. So disconnect the phone. I've got you all alone. If anybody knocks, you can't be found. It used to be that every time I'd take you out with me, so many fellers hanging around, I'd never get you free. So Katie, bar the door, don't let 'em in no more.
I only know of one recorded document of your work in the Indianapolis music scene. I don't know if you remember making this record? Norm Whitner and the District News.
You know about that band? You know that guy, those
Yeah,
guys?
yeah, it's an interesting record. Yeah, how were you doing gigs with them?
I didn't ever play with them, but I would go down and sit in with them. I was playing with Dottie West at the time, and I was kind of between touring, and anytime I got back home, I would always, Big Joe Jackson was the guitar player, and I would go down. I loved him. He was cool, and Norm and those guys. And I would go down, and there was a guy, Joe Tippy, that played steel that was real good. And he was kind of a go-to steel guy around Indy at that time. And crazy guy. He was so funny. I loved being around him. And so I would go down and sit in with those guys every now and then. They'd get me up, and I was like, hey, we got to get him up. He's going to sing some songs. I'd get up and do 3 or 4 songs. And then one day Norm called me and he said, hey, we're going to record. Would you come down and record with us? And I was cutting with Dottie West. I'd recorded down in Nashville a little bit, but I was just kind of starting to record some in Nashville. And so I go, heck yeah, I'll do it. And so I don't even know what all I played, but I played guitar and some stuff. I remember I played some kind of percussive thing on one track, and I go, I've never done that before. But it was fun being creative, making a record with those guys. And I really played with the Young Brothers more on the West Side. That's where I cut my teeth, really, with the Nashville Country Club. And
that's where Dottie West found you, right? Where you first met her. Yeah, that's what the last thing I wanted to ask you about your time in Indianapolis. Share your memory of that night with our listeners, if you don't mind.
Those guys, Larry and Daryl Young brothers, they were from not far in Kentucky where my folks are all from. They were just north of there around Stamford, Kentucky, north of us a little bit, more up toward Lexington. And but I knew them from up in Indy, and they played around a lot. And their sister married a guy, Max Stone, and Max Stone bought the Nashville Country Club, and they fixed it up, made it real nice. And so and then Larry and Daryl, that was their brother-in-law and sister. So they put the band together for there. And so they started, Billy Powell played steel and Dale Green played drums. So we had a pretty cool little band. Larry was a really good guitar player. And I would come in and sit in and play bass, or if they had people, at some point they started bringing in some, quote unquote national acts, and they would pay. They hooked up with an agent out of Nashville, and they'd bring in. They had a girl named Diana Trask once that was an Australian, lived in Nashville, but she was from Australia. Had a few minor hits, and they would bring in people kind of on that lower tier, but on their way up kind of thing. But one day Daryl called me and said, Dottie West, man, Mac hired Dottie. They got Dottie coming next month. I was like, oh my God. And she had already had some big hits. Her biggest record at that time probably was Paper Mansion. I knew it. She was my dad's favorite girl singer. And then she had I used to get the Music City News, and I used to read about Paul Franklin played steel with her on the road. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I'm definitely Daryl said, will you come and play with us that night? And I go, yeah, man. So I went down there, and we set up, and they got me up, and we opened the show, started playing, and I was so excited because I couldn't wait to see the show. And turns out Paul Franklin had already quit. He wasn't even touring with her. So I was like, oh man, but she had a great band. But I remember I was singing a song, and right before, about halfway through our set, and I remember I heard a girl's voice, and I go, there are no girls in this band. What's going on? And I looked around, and Dottie, this is unheard of, Kyle, but certainly in today it is, but even back then it was unheard of. Dottie had been watching from the back, and when I started singing, she came out and got on stage with me, and I looked around, and there she is standing there. and Dottie West, I heard harmony, and then she saw that I saw her, and then she started coming on up on stage. And she hadn't even played her show yet. You know, they were, and now the people are seeing this and everybody's getting out there from the tables. They're getting up and they're filling the dance floor. And the whole place just filled up with people standing around like a concert, which was, they never did that ever there. There's more dancing.
Yeah.
And so now the place is crowded with people. And then we get finished and I'm looking around and Dottie and she goes, do something else. And I go, I don't know what to do. And, you know, and so she goes, do you know Together Again? And I go, Together Again. I just started singing and she jumped in with me and sang harmony. And we did 2 or 3 songs and the place, of course, was going crazy. And I said, do you know Shelley's Winter Love? And she goes, yes. And then later she told me, she goes, that was written about my daughter, Shelley. Merle Haggard wrote it about Shelley, which I didn't know. I knew that song real well. It just had come out on an album called Hag. But anyway, so right after we finished, she left stage and she whispered in my ear and said, would you set in and play on our show? We're getting ready to do my show. And I go, I don't know your show. She goes, just play acoustic guitar and just follow us. So I set in and played her show, not knowing anything she did. I knew some of her records, but a few of them, but I sat in and played. And then when I was finished, her Byron, her drummer, who later was her husband, lived together and he was the band leader. He said, we want to see you on the bus out back. So we go on the bus and Dottie says, thanks for playing with us. That was fun. And I go, yeah, that was cool. I did. Sorry, I hope it didn't get in the way. And they go, no, it was great. And then she says, our bass player Marvin is quitting. They're having a baby. He's starting a family, getting off the road. And she says, would you want to join our band and travel with us and tour? And I go, I'm a senior in high school. That's what I said. I go, I'm a senior in high school. I got to finish school. She goes, well, how much more school you have? And I go, well, it's another couple of months till semester break. And she goes, well, talk to your school and see, you know. And then I went around to my school and my grades are okay, but pretty good. Not great, but okay. And then I got to one class, econ, Mr. Duncan. It was mandatory that I had to take that for the second. It's just a half credit. So I did this correspondence thing and he gave me grief too. He wasn't happy. All my other teachers were like, heck yeah, get out of here. Go tour Europe and go do blah, blah, blah. So I did. And then the draft was coming up and I was going to be in that draft. And I remember telling Dottie that I said, hey, you know, I got my draft card. I may go to the Army, you know. So, you know, she goes, well, we'll get you out of that. You know, I go, what? You know, Dottie, she was like, oh, I'll talk to so-and-so. And I was thinking, but as it turned out in 73, I think it all went away anyway. But I was thinking, I'm either going to Tennessee or to Vietnam. I'm not sure here. But anyway, so I came down here and I lived with Dottie for about a month. You know, I just blended in with her family, and which I loved all of her kids. They were still dear friends. So I took off, and first time I ever flew on a plane was to London. I'd never been on an airplane. Went to London, my first flight. So it was a real eye opener for a little kid, man, from Indiana. You know.
I remember when you said, with this ring I be wed. Now you've gone, betrayed my trust. Rings of gold have turned to rust. Tears can't wash.
I know. I love that it all happened in Indianapolis too. You didn't have to go to Nashville to get
that happened right there. And those young
get those
guys,
connections. Yeah.
The young brothers were, you know, they were great too. We were like brothers, and they were thrilled for me. You know, they loved it that it all happened right there, and they're both gone now. But I stayed in touch with them all the way too, and stayed in close touch. And it all happened right there in Indy, right there on the east side or west side. And what's that area now?
Eagle. It's so the Nashville Country Club was on Lafayette Road, and the neighborhood is called Eagledale.
Yeah.
And it's gone through a lot of ups and downs over the years. But that strip mall is still there.
Is it really?
Yeah, that the club was in.
I came out one night. I'm not sure I should tell this, but I came out one night about 2 a.m. because we would play and then we would go eat and go to Waffle House and eat and then come back and I just kind of hung out around Indy, and sometimes I'd stay all night with Daryl, and sometimes I would drive back to Noblesville. But I was getting back to my car. I came out of the club about 2 a.m. and that right out front there in the plaza, the shopping center. And right when I walked out, there was a guy with his back to me, and my car was right to the right here. And there was a girl over here by a car, and his back was to me. And when I walked out, he just turned around with a pistol and had it pointed right at me. And I was like, oh my God. And he just looked at me for a second. And I guess he was having issues with her. But I just went, hey man, I'm just going to my car right here. And he just turned back around to her. And then I got in my car and found a payphone and called the police. But I mean, it was sketchy, man, around some of those places. I don't know. It might have not been all the time over there, but it was usually pretty safe. But that night was crazy.
Yeah, there's still music in that Lafayette Road area, but there's a lot of Latin American clubs and a lot of huge acts from Mexico come and play over in that neighborhood. It's really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, cool to hear that. Glad there's still. And at the time, there was some what was called like showrooms and show places back in those days. They called them that, showrooms. And but I tell you, those guys used to pack it in at that Nashville Country Club, man. I didn't work there all the time. I filled in for Larry one summer for him when he was gone for a few weeks, and I filled in for him when I was between gigs one time before I started touring with Chet Atkins. But it was pretty wild. And my indie experience stuff was pretty cool. I played all around up there, man, and
I love
played
that.
cool places, and some pretty good mentors, so.
Yeah, one last question about Indianapolis. This club in Lafayette Road, this neighborhood, the Nashville Country Club, was not too far from an area called Indiana Avenue, which is the neighborhood that produced a lot of legendary jazz players from Indianapolis, like Wes Montgomery. Yeah, I know, you being such a great guitar master, I wondered if you ever listened to Wes or if he was an influence on you at all.
Certainly was. And I scratched my head for years going like, Indianapolis? He's from Indianapolis. I always was fascinated that he was from Indy also, or I was from Indy, and so was Wes Montgomery. And then for Kurt Vonnegut, and you go, wow, man, it's pretty damn special. And Dave Letterman. I never was on Letterman. My son was. He plays with Hart, my oldest son Ryan, and then he's been on Letterman a couple times with different people, But I always wanted to meet Dave because I wanted to talk indie with him. I bet you we'd have some good conversations about.
Come down during the race. He's here all month of May.
He wouldn't want anything to do with me. But I talked to Conan a few times. I played with Conan last year. He was real funny, but I'd like to talk to Dave sometime, especially about indie because he would know about Jan Eden. And all that.
I would think so.
Oh yeah. But I'm proud of my indie roots, man. I really am. And I went to look at Ball State, when I was in high school for art.
Yeah.
I was going to study art at Ball State University, and then I met Dottie, and all that stuff happened. And so my big joke is my musical stuff got in the way of my art career. I was going to study art.
Well, that's the perfect segue into your new show, The Flip Side. And I wanted to ask you about that. You were very serious about art as a young person. You just mentioned it. You wanted to study art after you graduated from high school.
Totally.
I know you paint almost every day, paint or draw.
I do.
Right?
I do.
Tell me about the role of art in your life over the last how many years have you been doing this?
I tell you, I truly think that I've been doing art almost as long as music, probably pretty close. Because I remember my dad from the Foundry, he would come home from the Foundry. They called it Noblesville Casting, but they called it the Foundry. He'd come home from the Foundry and bring paper for us kids to draw on. I guess it was the ends that they would cut off, but it was good portions of paper. And he would always just bring home stacks of paper. I guess they were throwing it out anyway, but we would draw all over that. And I remember as a kid drawing the Alamo horses, everything you could think of, and just loved to draw. My brother went on to be, as I said, an illustrator and a fine artist. And my oldest brother, Kenny, dabbled with watercolors a bit. So, and I used to, you remember in the comic books, I used to open up and it would say, draw Bambi or whatever it was and send it in. I did that 100 times. And the Chicago Art Institute, and I thought for a minute I might be a cartoonist and send those off and go to that art school in Chicago, but for a minute there. But But then I saw Ball State, and I thought, I might do that. And then I went to my dad and said, Dad, I might go. And he goes, well, I don't have any money. So, I went, okay, there's my art career, but I didn't have it wasn't his fault. It just wasn't, a house full of kids. But then the Dottie West thing came along. And so I've painted ever since, really. And traveling like I do all over Europe and everywhere I've been, Asia and stuff, it's been fun because my influences in art have been drawn from, as you would see if you get a chance in the next 6 weeks, if anyone finds themselves down here, you'd see that with my show. It's 61 pieces in this Mott Haven gallery. It's an old antebellum home that's a gallery, and it runs. It started June 21st, and it runs through July 26th. But it's 5 rooms, I think 4 or 5 rooms of 61 pieces of art, watercolors, oils, acrylics, encaustic, beeswax paintings, and all kinds of different mediums. But you'll see those influences, my travels through Asia and Europe and all over the place, and family too. My dad, there's some paintings, my mom and dad, and some personal. There's a watercolor painting of my dad when he was playing a VFW or somewhere. I did some kind of little painting of my dad. There's some personal things in there as well. So, but I mean, those two passions are just so connected, art and music. I mean, they're the same, really, aren't they? They're just one of creative outlet, really. And so many parallels between making music and making art, and visual art. So I'm doing one or the other every day. I'm either writing a song or composing or doing a painting or something, so. And my wife makes beautiful quilts. So we're one day she'll be working on quilts and I'll be doing a painting. So we're both being creative, so.
Well, the show is running until July 26th at the Mott Haven Arts and Cultural Center. How far is that from Nashville, where this is located?
It's about, 18 miles. No, it's kind of the north end of. It's right as you're coming into, not even that probably. It's just 10, 12 miles north of Nashville. It's a little area, Goodlettsville. They say Hendersonville, but it's really kind of Goodlettsville. It's right near that Rivergate Mall. It used to be about a couple miles from there. It's really between, it's like north side of Nashville, really. It's kind of about 10, 12 miles north of Nashville. Cool little area. I used to live out there when I first moved here years ago. And Johnny Cash, I recorded with Johnny Cash out there one time at his studio. And so it's a lot of musicians and country folks out there in this industry lives out that way.
Well, I hope to make it to the show by July 26th.
Yeah, if you do, let me know, please.
I will.
I hope you can, man.
I love that you included some of your history here in Indiana in the show. That's amazing.
I appreciate you asking for it. And one thing before we go, I will say we talk about my brother and the summits. I meant to say this earlier. You'll get a kick out of this. The Beatles played there. Was it 64?
64 at the fairgrounds. Yeah. I was going to ask you if you or your family went. Yeah.
My brother went, but here's funny, Kyle. He went with Kenny Kraft, who played drums with the Summits, our drummer. Oh, no, the guitar player. He later played drums with me, but Kenny Kraft and my brother Kenny, they went to see the Beatles and didn't have tickets. They just went there to try to find tickets. How funny is that?
Just hanging out at the gates.
They just went to see if they could get in. Well, they couldn't. So they stood outside the back door entrance of the Coliseum and heard the Beatles through the door.
That's
Is
incredible.
that pretty cool?
That's very cool. Mr. Wariner, thank you so much for taking time to do this. Hope to talk to you again, and best of luck with the show at Mott Haven, the flip side.
Let's stay connected because I love our indie connection.